हंसन विश्राम
VYGOS is Vihangam Yoga Global Online Satsang, which is scheduled every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Those who would miss to attend the morning session can listen to the broadcast replay on Sunday evening at 4:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. The aim of this forum is to give the entire world an opportunity to learn the ancient science of meditation and benefit from this pious service inspired by Sadhguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj, the pioneer of Vihangam Yoga. If you are interested in learning the technique or want to conduct a program at your place, and for any inquiry related to it, please feel free to write to us at info@vihangamyog.org. That is info@vihangamyoga.org.
Yes, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Vihangam Yoga Global Online Satsang. I myself am Abhinav, joining from Sydney, and once again, welcome to this platform where we try to bring forth a lot of the questions we have in this modern world and provide solutions and insights from the ancient science of Vihangam Yoga. This week, we're trying something a little different. We have a beautiful conversation which I had the privilege of sharing with Dr. Hemant Kumar, who is a scientist and is currently focused in IIT Bombay as an associate professor. I'm really excited to share this conversation, which I had with him on this week's topic, Focus, the Muscle of Self-Growth and Impact. So I'm going to keep it really short to start this week because we have a really awesome conversation coming through in a moment. So, I hope you're all looking forward to that. I'd be remiss if I didn't shortly mention one thing. The global climate and the world is currently being taken by storm with, as you all know, the coronavirus. Just on behalf of the Vihangam Yoga community, I hope you're all keeping safe. I hope you're all taking care of your loved ones. And I really hope that we, as the spiritual masters say to us, all difficult times do come to pass. So I hope that does come to pass soon on behalf of the community. So without further ado, let's go toward the Swagat Gan, and then let's move toward our conversation with Hemant ji.
आज स्वागत नित्य गुरुवर संत शुभागम आइए अध्यात्म विद्या दिव्य ज्योति सोमरस बरसाइए दोष दुर्गुण दूर करके शुद्ध हंस बनाइए भेद गम गति ज्ञान गर्जन शक्ति द्वार हटाइए खुले द्वारा शब्द सागर भक्त जन अनहवाइए जन सदा फल विश्व शिक्षक शान आन बताइए शान आन बताइए
Lovely. So now that we have gone through the process of Swagat Gan, we're ready to dive into this week. And, as I mentioned, I'm really excited to share this conversation with you all. In short, this week's topic is one which is very dear to all of us, and I've mentioned it in our conversation. And I really encourage you all, as you're listening, please do think about some of the things which we discussed and look at how you can apply them to your life. What makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And please list down any questions you have on slido.com/VIGOS or the WhatsApp number, which is just coming on screen now. So without further ado, I'm going to, move us over to that conversation and let's all see what we can gain from it. And then let's come back toward the end and move toward the next week and with a refreshed perspective. So without further ado, Hemant ji and a conversation with Hemant ji. So, welcome everyone to this conversation. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Dr. Hemant, as we introduced just a moment ago. And as you all know, today's topic is focus. And no matter which stage of life you're in, what you do with your time, we live in the information age. We live in this age where there's so many things going on, and focus seems like this impossible thing sometimes to even think about. And what we wanted to do today is to have a conversation, an open conversation about some aspects of focus, and maybe even understand how concepts like meditation contribute to a different, or let's say enhanced understanding of what focus could be or should be. So I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Hemant to you all. I hope that my voice is clear to you, Hemant.
Yes, Mr. Anbo. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a very busy schedule, so it's lovely to have you on. So Hemant, like just to set the context, like even myself, and I'm sure even yourself in your own life, like we all struggle sometimes with this idea of focus and how to focus. What I wanted to do to start this conversation is start with one question, which I think many of us listening have, which is, how can we define focus? What is it? Is it the ability to be present? Is it perhaps, control on consciousness? Is it mindfulness? There's so many words thrown around in the modern era. When we try to understand focus, it can get confusing, it can become troubling. So how would you define focus? Like, what is it actually?
I'll start with the George Lucas, who once said, always remember your focus determines your reality. So in fact, how focused you are determines your true identity. So let me start with a small story here. In the Mahabharata, Arjuna is being taught archery by his Guru Dronacharya, along with her other students. The Guru Dronacharya hung a wooded bird from a tree branch and then summoned his students, telling the students to aim for the bird's eye, but first to explain what they see. The first student approaches and the teacher asks the student, what do you see? The student says, I see the garden, the tree, the flowers, everything. The teacher asked the student to step aside and not to shoot. He asked the student and was told something similar. The next student replies, I see the air blowing the wind. The leaves are being blown by the wind. The Guru Dronacharya asked a few more students, and they all had similar replies. Then came Arjuna, and when Arjuna was asked what he saw, he said, the only thing I see is the bird's eye. Guru Dronacharya said, release your arrow, and Arjuna hits the bird's eye. So coming to the focus, with little reflection, we can see the importance of focusing here. To define focus, it is nothing but continued or prolonged attention towards the work you're doing at that moment. We are alert and attentive while we attend the job. Unfortunately, as you rightly said, sustained focusing or focusing for long has become a major concern for many. For instance, when you are driving, our eyes need to be on the road, but the eye just doesn't look at the road. The attention is also on the surrounding environment, which is being scanned while you move. In addition, the gears, the brakes, the gas pedal, all have to be changed, pressed, while worrying about the traffic. All are happening simultaneously. When we are learning, it's difficult, but it becomes easy when we have learned it. Now, if you add chatting or texting or if you're tired while driving, you often lose focus. To put in simple words, your ability to be present where you wish to be and not getting distracted is focus. Now, your second part, the mindfulness. According to some neuroscientists, mindfulness, on the other hand, has a broader meaning and perspective. By definition, it conveys essentially the same like focusing, but it's the human ability to be fully present and aware of the environment, and also aware of what we are doing, which means you are not giving undue attention to your distractions. Actually, some psychologists and psychiatrists extends this definition. And they say that you're not only living in the moment and being aware, but you also let go of things or bad events of your life that still lingers in your memory and haunts you. The practice of empathy and compassion is now a part of the definition of mindfulness. Surely, all of us would want to achieve this mindfulness. The big question is, how do you achieve mindfulness? What happens when you are stressed or face a bigger challenge in life? Can you still remain mindful? I mean, can you remain peaceful and still control your emotions? Another query, is mindfulness related to your mind? If yes, how does the mind work during the state of mindfulness? What is the subtle science behind its working? I believe without having a deeper understanding, can we really expect to achieve the benefits of mindfulness? And coming to your last part, you mentioned about the control of consciousness. The answer is no. The ancient Eastern philosophy mentioned body, intellect, brain. Look, even after centuries of medical research, we are yet to understand our body. We have barely made head in understanding the complex functioning of our brain. We have never seen mind or the chakras we so often talk about in the yoga classes. How can we even possibly realize or experience the consciousness, let alone controlling it? So from my perspective, it definitely needs much wider and in-depth understanding, and definitely under the guidance of a spiritual master. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hemant. I think that really kicks off this discussion in the right direction because I think you've very clearly defined the three things which people often, let's say, conflate would be the wrong word, but they associate focus to be. And I think you also raised an interesting point about the world we live in. And that leads to my second question, which is, we know that we live in this hypermechanic world. So what would you say that the key deterrents to focus actually are? Is it the world? Is it us? Like, what are these key deterrents which make it so difficult for us to be in that state of prolonged attention?
Thank you. Getting distracted or losing focus is common. And in fact, we all know this. We have all come across it. In the last decade, the technological revolutions have made our lives easy. But the apps that come free with our smartphones and gadgets have their own effects on our lives. Unfortunately, the technology that was meant to support us now control us. Incessant texting, even under the table at work or during important meetings, attending phone calls while driving, attending to large number of advertisement calls, posting on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, and so many other sites has now become more of a habit. Some people just can't live without it. You constantly check messages, emails, posts on social sites, and also expect a reply to your post as well. A thumb down often is heartbreaking. Trust me, we are all emotionally connected to our gadgets and posts. Neuroscientists are now confronting this as a new challenge that has gripped the society. Stress is not just from your work, but also from your household issues, with your friends, with your family, environmental impacts, traffic snarls, long queues, or fear being left out cause immense frustrations. These are all human made issues that are affecting all of us stealthily. Their effects are widespread and are seen among all age groups. Just the other week, I was reading a news in the newspaper that a youth jumped from his apartment on the 11th floor just because he was deregistered from his school's WhatsApp group. This is what happens when you lose focus. You're not able to think logically. All of these are deterrents to focus. So let's talk about some key deterrents. Lack of emotional or self control, not prioritizing the to do list. We also lack planning, sometimes poor planning. Many people lack short term and long term plans. We are driven by want than a need. For instance, is it not that we sometimes buy things because we just want it and not because we need it? We don't like the job, therefore, we are not enough motivated to go to work. Sometimes the poor mental and physical health is also a deterrent. Lack of energy from an exhaustive day at work, you're deprived of sleep, stressful conditions at house and work. And for some kids, you have hyper situations like ADHDs. For some, lifestyle is also to blame. At times, you have urgency to finish the job in time, and they all lead to panic situations. Losing focus also means we are distracted, and therefore we could be very unproductive during that duration. So by far, although we just had a quick look at the deterrents to focus, but from my point of view, the most key deterrent to focus is the mind itself. An uncontrolled mind keeps you engaged in activities that may not be productive to you. I think we all agree that mind is a time traveler, isn't it? Mind constantly plans about the future. Perhaps you want to achieve big in life. So you start planning early, you start envisaging, you dream about it. Something perhaps you want to get things done, so you keep thinking about it. At times, mind drags also into the past. Bad events of the past often brings pain and misery. You feel agitated, frustrated. Sometimes you boil with anger. In that case, it becomes very hard to concentrate and focus. You also lose peace of mind. Momentarily, mind does come back to the present, but then keeps on switching back and forth from past and future. We all have undergone this experience all the time. Therefore, the mindfulness expects us to achieve living in the present, which is exactly what mind prevents us from doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful explanation. And I think, I think it's becoming increasingly clear. I mean, we all experience this, that focus is important. And all the things you've mentioned, I think we've all experienced at different points in our lives. When we don't feel focused, what happens? And sometimes we have felt what it's like when we are focused. We get up from our desk, 3 hours have passed, and we achieved something fantastic. So, it raises the question, based on your background and your experience in a number of different areas, what would you say is actually happening when we are focused? Because perhaps by understanding that, we can start to unravel how we can be in that state all the time.
I think you agree with me. We all need focus. The important question is why it's important to be focused. See, all of us wants to excel in the job we are doing. We want to finish our work faster. Perhaps we are waiting for accolades, appreciations, awards for the job which we have finished. For that, we do hard work, and that requires sustained attention, and we need to remain devoted to our work. Hence, we need to be focused. But there are some jobs like pilots, particularly those in combat positions, they need to take quick decisions. There are surgeons and doctors involved in complicated surgeries. They, not, they need not only be focused, but they need to be very precise. All sports person we talk about, where everything matters in a split second. Students preparing for exams, kids doing their regular activities and studies, people going to office, all of us need attention and focus. So what's happening when we are focused? The answer is the mind is steady and controlled. Simply put, it's not wandering off unnecessarily. From the scientific perspective, see, our body is made up of chemicals, which in turn are made up of atoms and molecules, or matter. The same stuff which we studied in the basic science in our schools. The soul resides in our body, the conscious one, the one who takes decisions, which is you, is pure consciousness and is not formed from atoms and molecules, and is therefore a non-matter. Now we get information from the outside world, the world we experience, interact with, through our sensory organs, which are eyes, ear, nose, tongue, and skin, and through the organs of action, which are hands, legs, speech, your excretory and reproductive organs. Now, every experience which we undergo as a soul happens through this entity called mind, as it is only the mind that has attributes of both matter and non-matter. It's not the brain or your subconscious part of your brain, which many claim. This mind acts as a bridge between the soul and the world that you are interacting with the help of organs. Thus, every task that requires precision and accuracy, the mind not only has to be present at the moment, but it has to be balanced. If the mind wanders off, it takes you with it. Your consciousness goes with it. And you are lost in the activities that you weren't meant to be. You may be physically present, but you're not living in that moment. We thus end up wasting our energy. And on the top, we lose time and resources. Let's take an example. The sun's energy warms up the earth. So if you place a paper in the sunlight, it just warms up. How about if you place a focal lens? The light which was otherwise being scattered gets focused and this paper starts burning. This is the power of focusing. This focal lens of our body is the mind. So if you want to achieve the focus, one needs to control the mind. Since where your mind is, that's where you reside, and your world exists there for you. In fact, during focusing, the state of the brain also changes, and there have been numerous research that has been done to understand the signals that the brain generates during focus. So that would be take to this question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to discuss this more because I think, yeah, like that entire thing you mentioned of being in that state of focus and that power, that magnifying power, which seems to sit within us, but only it comes about when we're in the final moments before an assignment is unfortunately due. If only we could have that all the time, right? So yeah, it's a beautiful point, and I think it's also worth mentioning that we do all have that capacity It's just a matter of reaching that state of being able to enter there and leave there when we want. And it really leads on to this next thing, which is very dear to a lot of people who think about this and people who want to get better at being focused. We often talk about this thing called the flow state of, you enter this state where your brain is, as you mentioned at the end, it's reacting and it's working differently. So what is actually going on in the brain when we're in this state of flow, of being in what we call the flow state, where we really feel like we're hyper-focused?
I'll start with by defining what the flow state is. The scientist defines the flow state as the state of mind where you are very productive. You become so involved that nothing else seems to matter, which is what we are trying to achieve through focus, isn't it? So this state is achieved when you enjoy doing that job. That's what the scientists look at it. For instance, it could be cooking. For a mathematician, it could be just doing maths problems. Someone who likes hobbies would follow their hobbies. It could be simply like walking, doing exercises. Anything that interests you, that can take you into that state, it's the flow state, including meditation. So in the flow state, what happens? You do not force yourself to work, but it seems to be happening automatically. You flow through your work just like a river. You're flowing with it. Neuroscientists concur that it makes the present moment enjoyable. And that also builds in you this self-confidence, which leads to skill development and better performance and productivity. So flow state is important and therefore worth introspecting. I want to bring in a small study that was recently done by Japanese scientists in 2018. And they performed the EEG, or the electroencephalogram studies, on 16 participants. 3 conditions were tested. The first condition was boredom. Second condition is flow. Third is overload. So when you getting bored or you're not interested, you get into that state called boredom. When you're flowing, when you're enjoying the task which you have been given, you're in the flow state. And when it's too much for you, same work, same job, the scientists consider that as an overload. All 16 participants in an experiment were given maths problem to solve with increasing difficulty. The EEG study that was brought out suggested that the theta activities in the prefrontal cortex region were high in both the flow and the overload conditions. Alpha activity in the frontal and right central area of the brain gradually decreased with the corresponding increase in the task difficulty. The working memory wasn't too much to do. It was therefore the enhanced activity in the prefrontal cortex region that showed clearly in the flow and the overload conditions compared to the boredom. The study, however, concludes that more physiological indicators are required to define the various facets of flow experience. So this is I wanted to talk about the flow state. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating because, I think it's only in these states where we get lost in what we're doing that we really, and it's not even when it's happening, it's in that state of flux afterwards where we realize, wow, like what that state of mind was really like. And even this awareness of what's happening physiologically, it really feels like you're getting pulled out into being a different person after you leave this state. So it's very interesting, obviously, to understand. And you touched on how meditation also helps us kind of reach toward this flow state. And it organically brings about a question about meditation, which is, the primary concept upon which, Vihangam Yoga itself is formed, And the question becomes, how does meditation enter the picture of focus? We're talking about focus today. How does it contribute to focus? How does it help us become more focused?
Yeah, this is really, really interesting and important. Early on, I was referring to the mind and why it needs to be steadied. So the question is, how do you achieve it? The answer is meditation, of course. All ancient philosophies have laid importance to meditation, and we know that as we have read it so much. In our body, we just heard that it's the mind which connects with the soul first, and then the mind attaches itself with the various sensory organs, which eventually lead us to the experience of the world we live in. As part of meditation, I want to bring to the listeners that there are numerous methods of relaxation, chanting, yogic kriyas, including bandhas and mudras, pranayamas, that are at our disposal, each claim to be a proven technique of mind control. There is, however, another method, as Abhinavji just mentioned, an ancient, most practiced and perfected by Sadguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj in a cave, which in true sense helps to control the mind and gets the desired focus as well. This technique is called the Vihangam Yoga. The technique advocates just the 10 minutes of meditation every morning and evening. Sadgurudev writes his experiences in Swarved, where he mentions Man bandhe shodharana shabdakar so dhyan शब्द स्वरूप समाधि है परम तत्व विज्ञान. He talks about the mind control. The dharana is about controlling the mind at the point of concentration or at the abodes of Guru's center. When our gaze is so transfixed at the point of concentration that the technique or the feel that you are meditating vanishes, at that moment you are experiencing the sub or the words only. This is dhyan or meditation. I want to reiterate here that the words or the shabd here is not the same which we attribute in the world, but these words are experienced by practitioners during meditation. And finally, the state of samadhi is when you're not even aware of your presence and achieve the state of oneness with the higher energy. There has been several testimonies to this enhanced focus through the numerous EEG tests that has been done by the neuroscientists on the practitioners of Vihangam Yoga and neuroscientists from Italy, Netherlands, Russia. They have all come together to do these experiments. I just want to focus on a few results that have come out from studies. In one study conducted at Central Institute of Psychiatry in India, which uses 192 electroencephalogram study on practitioners, they studied the selected wave patterns in the brain, what happens before, during, and after meditation. The first state is called the restful alertness, which is relevant to the removal of stress. In the study, they found that there is an incredible enhancement of alpha waves by 5 times of its ambient level. This indicates a state of relaxation, and a simultaneous reduction in the delta waves was seen, which indicated an increase in alertness. So for a Vihangam Yoga practitioner, the restful alertness, that means one who is fully relaxed and yet they are fully aware and alert as well, happens to practitioners. And this study, this intensity of alpha waves was seen to again occur in the same prefrontal cortex region of the brain. Another study which talked about the productivity and effectiveness, which is, of course, relevant to the topic we are discussing today, efficiency and focus, and some of the key parameters which Japanese scientists wanted to study, they also were taken up here. These parameters were sustained attention, multitasking, task switching ability, selective attention, selective focus, distractor inhibitions, recall level. For Vihangam Yoga practitioner, it was reported that up to 50% higher, it was compared that at least 50% high uh, efficiency and focus level was achieved by the practitioners compared to those who were not practicing any meditation. Another uh, brilliant results that came out from this study was that when Vihangam Yoga was taught to 300 people in a village which was addicted with substance abuse and addictions of alcohol and smoking, the study said that, or talked about that de-addiction of nicotine or quitting rate of nicotine was around 70%, while the quitting rate of alcohol was around 55%, just with 6 months of practice of Vihangam Yoga meditation. And yet another study related to anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies, we saw that the decrease of negativity or negative thoughts or anxiety that happens in people, a reduction up to 30 to 50% was noticed just in 10 days of regular practice of Vihangam Yoga. To summarize this, what Vihangam Yoga meditation has to offer is that it talks about the transformation that can be brought about in the entire community so that we can make our neighborhoods a better place to live. So it seems we just not talk only about focus, but we can talk about all-round development of human beings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a beautiful message at the end there as well, because, you know, unlike before, let's say thousands of years ago, where we would live in smaller communities, we're living in this globally connected world now, where even just the words we put on online can have such a deep effect on people sitting thousands of kilometers away from us. So this message of empathy, of connectedness, of being more at rest and still being alert is so important to all of us living in the modern world. And, you know, it really starts to beg this question of, you know, many of these sages and meditative experts, they seem to have achieved this state or accomplished these things far from the world. So, you know, sometimes going into natural caves, sometimes going to jungles, and it starts to beg this question. You know, we live in this world where if we sit at our desk at work, we're being pulled into millions of different directions, and we have so many responsibilities as well. And the question becomes: is it possible for us to become focused, or do we need to renounce, or do we need to change the way we live? Where, you know, despite how spiritually accomplished we are, is it possible to be focused in this kind of a world?
Look, the world as it exists, what we see around us, is nothing but an outcome of complex energy exchange between living beings or life forms. We live in a world where we are bombarded with tons of information each day. We interact through social sites, websites, advertisements, office, home, society. It is therefore not difficult to see that we are being pulled in from so many directions. One way is to just give up or just procrastinate, or the other way is to get stressed. For some, a feeling that you don't have control over life takes over. So then the logical question is, can we still remain focused? The answer is, of course not. But when? This happens only when the mind, which is in some sense, acts like an enemy to us. It could be damaging if not controlled. You also mentioned about the spiritual accomplishment. I want to correct you here. Any person who is spiritually enlightened, the very first step is to control the mind. See, the spirituality begins with the experience of your own consciousness or your own soul. It's like looking reflection in your water. However, if there is no waves in water and the water is not still, you can't see your reflection, isn't it? But as I mentioned earlier, 10 minutes of Vihangam Yoga meditation, you don't have to go to a cave, to the jungle, to the mountains. In your own house, at your convenience, goes a long way in steadying your mind. It diminishes the ripples and the noise that it creates. You can see your true reflection. Indeed, the Harvard Business Review has repeatedly conveyed through their editorials, articles, that 10 minutes meditation is a must for managers at all levels of an organizational hierarchy. We all know that Japanese firms allow as much as 5 breaks in a day for meditation alone, for enhancing productivity through the control of mind, and that keeps us focused for long. So as we see that even if we are being pulled from so many directions, I think there's definitely a possibility to remain focused. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I think there's a lot of hope in that message because, like you said, from the experiments you shared, from some of the examples you just gave of different working environments, I personally, living in this world together with everyone, obviously, I also experience and feel that what we need is a potent way to control and to become more focused. And meditation, and in particular from personal experience, Vihangam yoga meditation is one of the most powerful and potent ways to do that. And kind of organically, that leads to another thought which I had, which I wanted to understand with you, which is, we're understanding meditation and what it does, and how it's tied to the mind. And many in the spiritual world seem to say that the source of a lack of focus is the mind. We've in fact discussed this a few times already. And just shortly, I wanted to understand with you, like, to what extent is this accurate? Is this complete picture, or is there more to it?
This has been beautifully explained by the verses of Swarved. Sadhguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj writes in Swarved, Mana udat le surtiko bahar drishy pasar जीव भूले निज रूप को भटकी रहे संसार. The answer to your question is yes. Mind is the source of lack of focus. It happens because an uncontrolled mind is our enemy, and its job is to keep us distracted. The mind can be thought of as a monkey. Just the way the monkey never sits still, the mind also never sits still. The mind, or the man, is that which is distracted and wavery by its very true nature. It sits within us and very obediently distracts us from our job that we were supposed to be doing. Let us find out how wavery our mind is. For instance, let's take an example. Just sit still and think nothing for a few minutes. You start, and for a few seconds, nothing happens. And once the few initial moments are gone, you start thinking that everything is fine and I'm doing great. No thoughts are coming, right? No, you're wrong. The very thought that we are doing nothing is in itself a thought which stealthily creeps up in your mind. In fact, some authors discuss this as thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things gets out of control or out of balance. For example, See, there is nothing wrong with the cells that keeps dividing and multiplying in our body. But what happens when this process continues in disregard to the total organism? The cells multiply, and what happens? It causes disease. Take for another example, the wavery nature of mind. Think of an animal other than an elephant. What happens? The very first animal that comes to your mind is elephant. And then you think about any other animal. Clearly, the mind overrules us. It takes decision on our behalf. It doesn't listen to us. We do what our mind wants us to do. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button, just the way Eckhart Tolle has mentioned? Maybe for a moment or two, right? But mostly not. Then the mind is using you. You don't even know that you are its slave. You are being enslaved by the mind without knowing it. So there is always a tussle between the mind and us. We want to do something else, and the mind wants us to do something else. There is always a friction between the inner voice and the mind. So I would say definitely the mind becomes a source of a lack of focus. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And, I think it's becoming more and more clear as we go through this conversation that the mind really is a troubling entity, one which is causing us, whether we know it or not, seems to be causing us harm, whether it be in what we do day to day or whether it be in what we're trying to do in the future. And this message of meditation, which you've been sharing, is one which is very comforting as a person who is trying to become more focused. What actually happens when we meditate, and how does it help us to be more focused is something we discussed a little bit earlier. But if we think about it a bit more, we see people who meditate sometimes for hours on end, and for me, even I can't even pay attention to a video for that long sometimes. So we've talked about meditation and how it helps us become more focused. Perhaps we can touch on that a bit more. But also, it'd be interesting to understand how do these people focus for hours on end? What is so special about them, and can we be like that?
I think what happens when you meditate can be best explained from the excerpts from Gita. Lord Sri Krishna teaches Arjuna the meditation to control the mind. Arjuna sits in meditation. The next moment, he explains to Lord Sri Krishna what happened during meditation. As a part of meditation technique, Arjuna was told to transfix his sight or gaze to a point with his eyes open, and was told not to wander off from the point of concentration. Simply put, Arjuna was supposed to look continuously at the point of concentration. He had to be focused. Soon after, Arjuna explains what actually happened during meditation. He says the mind wandered off from the point of concentration. He observes that he is not able to fix his gaze for long. He finds it extremely hard to remain focused. He admits that the mind is even subtler than the wind, as it can move faster than the wind. It is as difficult as to control the wind itself. The Gita mentions, Chanchalam hi manaha Krishna pramati balvadradham tashyaham nigraham manne vayurivshu dushkaram. No matter which meditation technique we follow, all of us have experienced this. In fact, almost everyone stops following the technique and instead gets lost in thought. One thought follows the other. This triggers a chit-chat in your mind, which continues unabated. This happens during the regular worships and our regular duties, day-to-day duties that we do. So what is the solution? The solution is offered by Lord Sri Krishna. Lord Sri Krishna teaches Arjuna that only a regular practice and detachment from the worldly subjects can help control the mind. Ashansayam mahabaho manor durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyachena grihyate. Just the way a goldsmith heats the impure gold and then cools it off, again heats it and cools it. This process is repeated till the time all impurities in the gold gets removed and the gold becomes pure. The gold shines with brilliance. In the same way, the impurities of nature, which appear as layers on the mind, are slowly removed by meditation. Only a pure mind is able to progress in spirituality. This is exactly can be achieved today with the help of Vihangam Yoga meditation, which has been perfected. The technique has been perfected by His Holiness Sadguru Shadafal Devji Maharaj. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think as you shared, like, this idea of meditation and its importance is one which has been with us through time. And if you are out there thinking about how can I focus for hours on end, well, it starts with focusing for a few minutes on end. And then in that process, we, as Hemant just shared with us, we start to, this process of fixing our gaze becomes more organic, and it becomes something we're not even aware of. And we start to enter these prolonged periods of focus, which you mentioned. And what I wanted to understand with you is, what effect does that have? Will it make us more capable of achieving our goals? Is there a physiological thing that helps there? Like, what does prolonged focus lead to?
I'll just take the first part of your question and then we'll move on quickly to the second part. So there are people who want to focus and there are people who can focus for long. I think it depends on your determination, how committed you are to achieve it. Much like anything you want to achieve in the world, you want to do a job, you write an exam, starting a startup company, all needs complete devotion and dedication. Even if there are hurdles, bottlenecks, you need to move with grit and determination. A 10 minutes meditation morning and evening goes a long way to achieve this. You may have to add a bit of yoga and pranayama to enhance the duration of practice, but with consistent effort, you start to get the experience which helps you to remain focused for hours. See, you don't have to be spiritually inclined to practice this, because the meditation itself frees you from stress, tension, depression, anxiety, which we all get through our daily activities. Not initially perhaps, but with practice, one can remain focused for hours. In fact, the practitioner of Vihangam Yoga reaches to a higher level of meditation, where the focus itself becomes meaningless, since the practitioners have not only controlled the mind, but have transcended into the zone of consciousness, a blissful state of experience. The testimony lies in Swarved. Swamiji writes, Itna adhik anand hai, bhokta aap hi bhool, ab kya pucho madhukasha, jo sab sukh ka mool. So in a nutshell, the experience which you get during meditation, when you start getting relieved from stress and depression, you remain in the blissful state. But of course, this needs a lot of practice. So to the second part of your question, what effects does it have on a prolonged period of focus? Will it make me more capable of achieving my goals? That's what you asked. Surely, achieving the goals becomes easy because you're now more capable. See, all of us have short-term goals and long-term plans. A focused person is able to achieve their goals faster and with ease. Of course, the hard work to accomplish them still needs to be done. But with prolonged period of focus, one is able to control the mind with the master's blessings. The aims of your life surely gets fulfilled if you're consistently working towards it. Only that the focusing, just like the focal lens in your body is your mind, helps to achieve it faster. It acts like a catalyst. But I want to bring attention to the listeners to another important thing. One also needs to understand the objective of human birth. It's not just about the birth as a human being, but being embellished with attributes of a truly human is equally important. This is what is the aim of spirituality, to become compassionate, loving, caring, forgiving, doing righteous duties, serving, sharing, giving up all your malices, hatred, jealousy, scrupulousness. Is it not that what mindfulness wanted to achieve? It's important to imbibe the humbleness and humility also, instead of becoming proud and egoistic. These are the real achievements. A spiritual master once said that no matter how much wealth and worldly achievements you may have acquired, you would remain a poor if you did not acquire spiritual wealth. I believe the aim of prolonged period of focus should be to purify the mind as much as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, and this process of becoming capable of doing that, as you mentioned, is a dive into being more determined. Because if you think about it, we've been maybe contained by this entity called mind for most of our lives, maybe. And to start to unwind that is obviously a very gentle and delicate process. And, we're talking about what it means to be human, what it means to be more connected. On the flip side, we live in a world of social media, in a world of technology, of information. Sometimes even myself, I worry, that if I'm not connected to everything, if I do become, a kind of person who's very focused, I'll miss out on important information. So, if I am striving to meditate and be more focused, how can I balance that with this feeling? Some people call it a fear of missing out, and it can be hard to find a way around it. How do you balance living a very deliberate, focused life with a world which is so hyper-connected with everything?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And this is so rampant in our society. I think you tried to mention the fear of missing out, which is also termed as FOMO. To the listeners, FOMO is an anxious feeling you get when you feel other people might be having a good time without you. So how does it translate in the digital age? FOMO for you means constant checking of social sites to see what your friends are doing. Back in 1990s, it was Dan Herman who first gave this phenomenon called FOMO, but it was made popular by another Harvard MBA student, Patrick McGinnis, who wrote this in detail in 2004 in the Harvard, which is nothing but Harvard Business School's student newspaper. So I'll just want to quote the Patrick McGinnis's words here. He says, before the age of mass social media, people used to make plans and then they stuck with them. Because what else were you going to do? So you'd make a plan for the Friday night and you'd go somewhere and you'd stay there. And that's what you did. But with sites such as Facebook and other social sites, you could now constantly check to see what else was going on in your social circle. The idea is that people are aware of their own mortality rate. So they felt that they need to live life to the fullest every second. And particularly this became popular after 9/11 incident. As use of social media exploded in 2004, McGuinness and his friend once considered a problem or a local problem with only few people or few local groups became so widespread that some health professionals now call it a serious concern. I want to quote a study that was conducted in 2013 by a researcher, Andrew Przybylski, and his team at Oxford University. In a study, what they found that nearly 3/4 of young adults suffer from fear of missing out phenomenon, or called FOMO. In their study, they discovered that people's fear of missing out causes them to continuously check social media and negatively compare their lives to the supposedly better lives of their friends. Of course, this can lead to unhappiness and in some cases depression. Today, we all know FOMO has gripped not just the youths, but can be seen in people of all ages. No wonder marketing strategists try to bring in new gadgets every now and then. We all procure and buy things which we may not need, and this applies to all merchandise items. From my personal perspective, I think the core issue here is about contentment and satisfaction. We are never satisfied with what we have, and therefore constantly crave for more. What's the solution? The way around is controlling the mind again. For it is the mind which keeps looking for new experiences every now and then. Therefore, it needs to be checked and controlled. We need to ensure that the monkey mind don't jump around too much. The other answer is we also need to learn managing and start optimizing our resources. It's not easy though. But if we constantly remind oneself that every single object in this world is a part of bhog, or the pleasures which we derive at our level of senses, the happiness that one derives from it is short-lived. But we know that there are infinite number of such pleasures. We can't just keep craving for everything. There has to be a break on our imagination. I suggest spend more time with your family, friends in real time, and stay away from gadgets. And most importantly, please meditate whenever you get time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I think that's such an important thing. Like, why do we feel FOMO? I think you really rightly put it there. Like, I think it's more about contentment, as you just mentioned. And as we move toward the end of this conversation, we're talking about focus. We've talked about meditation, how it helps us, what it causes in the brain physiologically. So, where are we headed? What is the ultimate state of focus? In creative media, sometimes it's depicted as being in this state of Zen and being connected to everything. To what extent is that true? Where are we really headed?
The ultimate state of focus is peace of mind, inner peace. That's all we want at the end of the day. A good night's sleep in the night, getting a job done in time without procrastination, giving up FOMO, be mindful, all of it, whatever we discussed today, they're all part of that should be the ultimate state of focus. This, however, is achieved through immense practice of meditation. One does not have to reach higher, but just to remain or just to control the mind and remain focused. I say, what's the harm in living a life free of stress, depression, and anxiety? Nevertheless, if you're spiritually inclined and you want to, as you just rightly mentioned, the state of Zen, we need to continue the practice, and the practice slowly transcends you into the higher stage of meditation. That's the place where one's consciousness get connected to everything around you. The state of oneness or the state of Zen can be experienced in the state of Samadhi. You understand the secrets of nature. It's working, its energy, the universal law of change, everything can be experienced in that state. You practice more with the blessings of Sadguru, the master of spirituality, one can go beyond to experience the oneness with that supreme being or the supreme energy that pervades everywhere. That is the state of yoga or union, which has been taught by the seers and sages, the true scientists from ancient most time, to all human beings that have ever lived on the face of this planet. Again, Swarved says, योग कहत हैं जोड़ को, योग कहत हैं संधि, योग रहस्य उपाय में जीव ब्रह्म की संधि. If you can achieve this union, focus is immaterial. The focus happens at will. To the answer to the question is yes, the state of Zen or oneness is achievable. In this state of inner connectedness, you are much more alert, more awake than in the mind identified state. You're fully present. As you deeply go into this realm of no mind, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In this state, you feel your own presence with such intensity, that such joy, that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body as well as your whole external body become relatively insignificant in comparison to the experience of that oneness. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And, I think to bring this all to a close, I had an interesting thing that I wanted to end on, at least, that an interesting thought which I've been tussling with as we've been talking today, which is, does there come a point in this journey that you just described of experiencing, this more subtle form of energy which pervades different spaces and dimensions, or just different, all the things we see with our eyes, basically. In that journey of going from milestones which we can understand in our modern lives, such as just being more focused, being less stressed, all the way to spiritual growth and progress, does there come a point where we become so focused that meditation is no longer a requirement and we don't need to apply as much effort anymore?
Yeah, this is the highest form of living, and it's only lived by a yogi, because yogi has achieved that. Because they are in a state where you don't need to meditate, because you're constantly in the state of meditation. You can use your mind, body, brain, intellect at will in the most optimized way, just the way a yogi does. You don't strive to get focus at that moment, but the focus becomes a part of life. It's instant, it's effortless. You flow with the energy because you feel the energy that pervades all inert and conscious elements. We just don't feel it now, but it's there. In fact, Lord Sri Krishna preaches Arjuna to perform all actions in that state of yoga, a state where you would still carry out that worldly duties. Arjuna did that as a warrior, but would remain connected to that omnipresent high energy. At that moment, there are no more distractions, for you have controlled the mind, purified it, sublimed it, and now this purified mind can now be used for the betterment of humanity. The joy you experience is inexplicable. For my listeners, what I want to say is Sadhguru Shadafal Devji Maharaj had never had any primary education. Yet he wrote 35 spiritual scriptures during his lifetime, of which the most important is Swarved. The verses explains the secrets of nature, how and why the mind needs to be controlled, the benefits of getting focused, how then we move to higher spiritual planes from self-realization to the journey of oneness with everything else. the union of self with that omnipresent energy, the highest form of focus a human can achieve, where the definition of focus itself gets lost and the focus becomes part of you. Yes, that's achievable if you become a yogi. And that is what is the aim of meditation. So, what is the take home message? What's the learning we had today? See, the mind is an excellent instrument, but only when used rightly. If we use it incorrectly or wrongly, it becomes very destructive, just like fire. At this moment, we don't use the mind, it uses us. We believe that we are the mind, and therefore we are not able to hear the inner voice. This is the delusion which we currently reside in. So, to all spiritual aspirants and otherwise also, the single most important step in your journey towards enlightenment is first, learn to disidentify from your mind. How do you do it? Simple. If a thought occurs in your mind, you are aware of it. The entity that is aware of this thought is you, the conscious one, and the thought itself occurred within the mind. So they are two distinct entities which you just experience. This awareness itself is the first step. Second step, every time you create a gap in the stream of thought process that happens in your mind, the chit chat that happens in your mind. So if you can create a gap or if you can stop or prevent it, the light of consciousness, your inner awareness grows stronger. This is the beginning to the end of that incessant thinking, involuntary thinking. This is the beginning of your natural state of oneness with the self and the high energy, which at present is obscured by the mind. With practice, the sense of your presence and peace within you will deepen. For this, dear friends, we need master of spirituality, Sadguru, to guide us, to help us and achieve the desired focus, which happens with the control of mind. And I also want to quote the neuroscientist Amishi Jha from the University of Miami as he puts it, pay attention to your attention. Thank you, and Jai Shri Gurudev.
Thank you so much, Hemant ji, and I don't think we could end on a better note than that. So thank you for joining us this week, and I'm looking forward to many more fruitful and exciting conversations just like today in the near future. So yes, thank you so much, Hemant ji, once again. And let's, in the interest of time, let's go straight to all the Shanti part, followed by a really quick summary.
विराग त्याग की शांति हो, उदासीनता शांति, सेवा जित शिष्य शांति हो, सत्य शांति हो शांति। हे प्रभु शांति स्वरूप हो, शांति शांतिमय शांति, शांति शांति जन शांति हो, पूर्ण शांतिमय शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति, देव सदा फल शांति में, शांति शांति सुख शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति, देव सदा फल शांति में, शांति शांति सुख शांति।
So in summary, folks, and I don't think I can do any better a job than Hemant ji, who just, really gave us such a deep and wonderful understanding of focus. Focus is a muscle. It can be exercised like any of the muscles in the body, and it's up to us. As Hemant ji said, if we can be determined, if we can sit and meditate twice a day, every day, we within ourselves will see the change and the benefits. So with that, let's reflect for the coming week. And I'm really excited to share more conversations with Hemant ji and all of our wonderful speakers in the coming weeks. So with that, Jai Gurudev, and I hope you all have a wonderful and safe week ahead.